Hello there, patrons, and welcome back to the Fighting Pit for Season 4, Episode 1 of the Knights of the Nerd Republic Patreon Versus Series. I am your host, Jared the Dark Jedi Bachman Subs, and I am joined by my co-host with the co-most in these our Fighting Pits, Spencer the Mando Simpson. How you doing, buddy?
I am doing okay. I'm excited to kick off this season with an interesting matchup that we spent a lot of time behind the scenes talking about and trying to figure out exactly how we wanted this one to go so that it would make the most interesting matchup possible of the different versions of these characters from different points in their timeline. But we are very excited to bring you this matchup and for what is this, season 3, to be back with you for
Season 4. Season
4. Which one did I just like completely erase from my memory?
3.
Difficult to say.
The half season.
The half season, yeah. So yes, I'm very excited to be back.
Yeah, this is a stacked season. Patrons, I put the full lineup, not in release order, in the Patreon. Y'all are gonna know when which match is coming, except for this next one, because I'm gonna announce it now because we are behind a little bit. We'll try to get this next one out next week. But next week's, this month's, because this is technically January's, you're watching right now, is going to be Qui-Gon Jinn versus Siege of Mandalore Ahsoka Tano. This season, I am normally not one for New Year's resolutions because I've always been the type of person who finds them arbitrary. You know, like I don't know. I think part of my brain has never enjoyed the idea that you're only allowed to decide to do something better at the beginning of the year. Because at that point, like, there's a sunk cost fallacy, in my opinion, that the moment you fall off the wagon, you've fallen too far behind. But this year, I did decide that I wanted to get a little more proactive with the Versus Series stuff. So if you go and look at the Patreon, we do have the full lineup posted there for this season. Again, it's not necessarily in order, and you guys don't know these arenas we're using either, which I think is going to be a fun little number. We got a mix of some ones that we've decided it's time for them to be recycled back into the fold, and some newer ones as well.
I gotta say, and this isn't really a spoiler, this is just some general observations. I am very pleased with some of the potential arenas that came out of Andor season 1. I'll just put that out there.
Yeah, I will for the sake of like a little tease of transparency, there are 2 Andor arenas on the docket this season. The one of them was almost a different part of this same location. But the more I thought about it, the more I was like, you know what? I want it to be more cluttered. I am referring to arena number 1. For those of you who pay attention to this show and start to connect dots as arenas get chosen. But for anybody who's new around these parts, or to warm you guys up, I'm going to let Spencer take the wheel here and explain to you the format of our little show that we make for you guys.
Yeah. So thank you for joining us if this is your first time with us, and thank you for joining us if you are a regular with us for the Versus Series matchup. So what we do is we spend some time beforehand thinking, and Jared with his New Year's resolution is very on the ball with this, but deciding on some matchups, and then we will pit them against each other in a pitched fight. This isn't pre-met, like they don't have any preparation time. It's as if they're just stumbling upon each other. We don't need a reason for them to fight. They just will fight. And we evaluate them in 5 categories that we deem were most appropriate for evaluation. Those are physical attributes, martial arts ability, force ability, weapons and equipment, and finally their tactics and their battle mindset. What their approach is to a fight, how they will adjust their strategy if need be, and so forth. That's the gist of it. So we've written up some bios to give you guys a little peek into each of these characters. Some of them in this season you'll be very familiar with, like at least one of, if not both of the contenders for today's matchup, for the January matchup. But later on in the year, we're going to be dealing with some people that, depending on your little corner of Star Wars fandom, you may be less familiar with. And so that's what the bios hopefully will do for you, is give you some background on these characters and their stories and why we think they would make a good matchup for that particular month. So anyway, we will go through one at a time in those 5 categories, and we will assign a soft verdict of sorts of who we think would take that category between the two. And then after we have gone through all 5 of those, then we will select an arena at random from the predetermined list, which does make a difference. It certainly does make a difference depending on the arena. So at that point, we will enter into a theoretical fight breakdown, how we think this battle would commence, how it would continue on, and then how it would eventually conclude, and we will crown the victor at that point. A human male born on the planet Stujon in 57 BBY, Obi-Wan Kenobi began his training as a Jedi at a very young age before becoming the Padawan of renowned Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn. During the invasion of Naboo, Kenobi and his master were tasked with protecting Queen Amidala, at which time they stumbled across the alleged Chosen One, Anakin Skywalker, and the return of the Sith. Kenobi would supposedly kill the Sith apprentice Maul, be granted knighthood in the Jedi Order, and begin training Skywalker as his apprentice. With the emergence of the Clone Wars, Kenobi was granted the rank of general and was an instrumental leader in the armies of the Republic, facing such opponents as Dooku, Ventress, and Grievous on multiple occasions. As the war drew to a close, General Kenobi was sent to Utapau, where he finally killed the droid General Grievous. With the issuance of Order 66, Kenobi escaped Utapau and helped warn surviving Jedi to remain in hiding. He then faced his former apprentice, the now Darth Vader, on the volcanic world of Mustafar, defeating his friend, comrade, and brother, and leaving him for dead. Kenobi spent the next few decades in exile, watching over the boy who would become a new hope for the galaxy, eventually training him in the ways of the Force and sacrificing himself in a duel with Vader aboard the Death Star to ensure the escape of the young Luke Skywalker. Obi-Wan Kenobi retained his identity in the Force after death and often returned to give counsel and guidance to a new generation of Jedi. And his opponent.
Born before the fall of the Jedi Order, Galen Marek was the son of ex-Jedi Kento Marek and Mali Nayon Carrick. While the Mareks were holed up on Kashyyyk, Darth Vader laid siege to the Wookiee homeworld to conquer the planet and execute the hidden Jedi. After a noble effort to fend off the Dark Lord, Kento was eventually defeated, and as Vader wound up to finish Marek off, his son was able to overcome the telekinetic barrier of Vader to rip his lightsaber away from him. This did not save Kento, as Vader simply crushed him with the Force, and as he secretly adopted the young Galen. The next 17 years of Galen's life would be full of brutal, unforgiving, vicious training under Darth Vader as his secret apprentice with the code name Starkiller. Galen was mostly used as a covert assassin, but when the time came, Marek was sent after his first Jedi target, Jedi Master Rom Kota. Marek overcame Kota and then was sent after the unhinged Kazdan Paratus and eventually faced off with Jedi Council member and legendary warrior Shakti. Having bested a gauntlet of masters, Marek was betrayed by his master after Darth Sidious became aware of his existence. Now being assumed dead by the Emperor, Vader ordered Galen to assemble the Empire's enemies to force the Imperial military to overextend itself. In a complicated sequence of events, Galen, now also being trained by General Kota, was betrayed yet again by Darth Vader, now learning that this was always the goal. Galen shook off his defeat and chased the kidnapped freedom fighters back to the yet-to-be-finished Death Star. Aboard the space station, Galen went blade to blade with his master and was able to overcome him and fought Darth Sidious to a standstill. When he faced the choice of killing the Emperor or becoming his new apprentice, Merrick chose to kill Vader, but could not go through with the Emperor's final test of executing Rom Coda. As a result, the Emperor used the Force to pull the Rogue Shadow into the throne room, seemingly killing Merrick and everyone he cared about. However, Merrick would eventually awaken, heavily modified, on an operating table to learn that the Emperor had kept him alive to do his bidding until he found a new apprentice. And Merrick, now fully surrendered to the dark side, became Lord Starkiller. After the destruction of the Tantive V4, Starkiller was sent to Tatooine to find 2 droids carrying stolen plans for the Death Star. After killing Boba Fett and escaping Jabba's palace with information, Lord Starkiller headed to Docking Bay 94, where he met and killed Obi-Wan Kenobi. The Millennium Falcon escaped and the Death Star was destroyed, but Lord Starkiller pursued the rebels to Echo Base, where he would eventually fight Luke Skywalker. Through the course of their lengthy duel, the unguided Skywalker gradually succumbed to his rage, fully surrendering to the dark side and becoming Lord Starkiller's apprentice. So, you might have noticed there that one of our opponents has already killed the other one. And you'd be right. Lord Starkiller did kill Old Ben Kenobi. You know who he didn't fight? Jedi Master and Jedi General Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Certainly not, no.
So this is really exciting for me as a matchup, because with this season of the Versus Series, on top of like getting a little bit more proactive with how we, prepare for these matchups, I also wanted to kind of get out of, my comfort zone a little bit with how we make them. I like to use people who are really well established. I like to do stuff that involves the least amount of guesswork possible. But this is pretend, and it's for fun. So we're gonna get a little skeptical this season and moving forward as well. So one of the first things I wanted to tackle, and again, another promise I'm going to make now, we will be releasing the Force Unleashed retrospective I want to do this year. But while I was replaying the Force Unleashed 1 last year, and I read the novelization beginning to end for the first time, there was a really interesting thing that came up. And for those of you who've played the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 port of the game will remember that there is a scene where Proxy tries to jump Galen in the form of Obi-Wan Kenobi circa Revenge of the Sith. And Starkiller pieces him up real easy, takes out Proxy, and mentions that it had been quite some time since Proxy had taken that form. Later in the novelization, having bested Rom Coda, Kazdan Paratus, and Shaak Ti, Galen mentions that this isn't that fighting Proxy masquerading as a Jedi is not what it's really like fighting a Jedi Master. And while Proxy is good in his holographic form, get ready for a new audio drop, he does not.
Dog.
What if I told you Blank has that dog in him? Guy is my favorite person on TikTok. Get used to seeing that clip. What if I told you had that dog in him? And hologram Obi-Wan Kenobi is not the same man who nearly killed Vader twice, defeated General Grievous, bested Maul, bested Asajj Ventress. So yeah, he's going to fight the real deal, not the old decrepit version who has not, fought anybody in years, nor is he fighting a skilled but literally hollow graphic version of Obi-Wan either. We're going to have him fight Obi-Wan in his prime and have it be the most sinister version of Starkiller as well. Then again, I just think makes it more interesting because, in my opinion, the way that people talk about Galen in a vacuum is inaccurate. We talked about this when we used Galen before. I agree with the assertion of the whole council force cast group of people. Galen is not a force god. He is incredibly crafty. He's incredibly clever and inventive. And he is powerful, but he's not a god. Those force god feats, those apply to Lord Starkiller because you're dealing with a being who, not unlike Maul or Vader, is just being fueled by pure unadulterated anger and hatred, which makes him basically a superconducting loop of the dark side unto himself. So, I think it's going to be an interesting matchup. There will be some caveats we got to touch on as we go. In terms of like Obi-Wan's loadout, we're basically going to treat it as though it's Revenge of the Sith Obi-Wan in terms of stats, basically like midway through the war. I would say at about the 1.5 year mark, 2 year mark of the war, the difference between Obi-Wan at that point of the Clone Wars and Obi-Wan at the end of the war is negligible for the most part. So you ready to truly get in the weeds here?
I am ready. We got some a full disclosure for everybody listening. The dog here is very unhappy that I put him away for the duration of the episode, but I've got finger on the mute, so we're looking to press on. So first up, I'll just jump right into physical attributes for Obi-Wan. He is a human male, 5'9". He's got an athletic build. We've seen him withstand immense amounts of physical abuse, hand to hand, being thrown across the room, all kinds of stuff like that. I mean, he kicks General Grievous in the shin and regrets that pretty badly. But he's a sturdy guy. He's athletic. He's neither super fast nor super strong, but he's kind of like right in the middle. Very, very. I mean, he's the what you would call an all-around athlete, I guess.
Yeah, with superhuman endurance. He's not a speed demon like Maul. He's not a powerhouse like Anakin or Vader. But he makes up for his like middling stats in those realms for the fact that he is a glutton for punishment.
Yeah, he takes a licking and keeps on ticking. Like it's really difficult to put him down from exhaustion. It's even more difficult to put him down with superior swordsmanship. He's like you're saying, he's built to last. He's very, very, very good like that.
Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Had that dog.
It's my favorite clip on the internet ever. Lord Starkiller. So Galen Merritt clocks in at about 6 feet even. Is a slender but athletic build. He's incredibly tough after years of brutal conditioning and training by vacuum. Training by Vader, and has survived the vacuum of space. And has also sustained multiple lightsaber wounds. One of his most impressive physical feats is that he basically went in to fight legions of stormtroopers in ATST, Darth Vader, and the Emperor, depending on who you ask. But for our purposes here, Vader and then Vader. But he could have taken the Emperor as well, as we know. However, he did that with half of a broken rib cage, basically. But for the specifics of Lord Starkiller, we're also looking at him having some slight cybernetic upgrades. Obviously, he has a partially mechanical right arm. We're going to use, again, we're saying Lord Starkiller. I'm leaning towards his actual I'm not sure. This is another thing I wasn't 100% sure about. And I know I released a teaser thumbnail, but that was kind of a placeholder. Do you want to go Lord Starkiller, like the Hoth DLC, or are we just going straight Sith Stalker?
I mean, I've always had a soft spot for the Sith Stalker. I don't know.
Okay.
What do you think?
I can go either way. I used Lord Starkiller because the Sith Stalker outfit is in my opinion, a little too edgy even for me. But I am very okay with going full edge for this one.
I mean that's why we're here. We picked Lord Starkiller. We might as well.
The Bear the dog also agrees on using Sith Stalker. Okay, well then he also has a gigantic blade on his arm for some reason too. Then it's a part of his body, so that's body, weapons, equipment, all kinds of stuff.
We'll get to that.
He's also packing, no matter which version you pick. In terms of who gets the edge here, I think it's a relatively close call. I don't think there's a definitive edge in either direction. If anything, I'm willing to give it to Obi-Wan.
I could see it going a slim edge to either one, but I would say Obi-Wan is slightly better rounded physically. I think Starkiller is athletic, but he is taller and slenderer. And yeah, they're both tough, but like at what point does having been run through with lightsabers and been sucked into the vacuum of space serve to the overall detriment of your physicality as opposed to somebody who's intact?
You get into the same conversation that you almost start to have with Vader, where it's like, yes, he is a very impressive physical specimen. He's also suffocating all the time. And where you draw the line in him being a superhuman versus him being on the cusp of death. Again, it's a hard it's a hard line to draw. We might end up keeping the Lord Starkiller art in the thumbnail because I'm looking and it's hard to find like a good picture of him in that outfit with his lightsaber out. But that's neither here nor there. But yeah, we'll call that a draw. I don't see a meaningful difference between them. Like I said, maybe Obi-Wan by a hair. Like here's the thing: each of them have like a ridiculous feat that the other one doesn't. Like Galen has survived being stabbed in the chest, thrown into the vacuum of space, having the rogue shadow just thrown on him. But for all of those, like, Obi-Wan has also, literally just been lit on fire and nearly burned to death. Which again, we're not using Obi-Wan circa Kenobi, but it's still a feat he has that I think translates retroactively. If you look at Legends, you have his very long campaign on Jabim. You have endless torture from Asajj Ventress. I think they roughly break even. So I'm not going to try to split the hairs of who survived which deadly injury more than the other.
I'm satisfied with a draw.
Yeah.
I don't think it'll come down to this by far.
No, not at all. But yeah, moving right along, Spencer, would you like to walk us through the martial acumen of the Negotiator?
I would be pleased to do so. So Obi-Wan Kenobi is the definitive master of Sarisu. He like if you were to make a textbook of Sarisu, you could just copy and paste Obi-Wan Kenobi into chapter 3 of the forms textbook, because he is at its very finest form, no pun intended, is Obi-Wan Kenobi. I mean, the form itself revolves around creating a impenetrable wall of defense that is able to conserve energy and outlast, and that's Obi-Wan to a T. I mean, he's he's down for a marathon. He's an Iron Man dueler. He can just keep going until the opponent is so far wore down that he can just exploit the smallest of openings and turn the tide in his favor to end the battle. But he is also skilled in hand-to-hand combat, but only as needed. If it comes to it, then he'll be able to hold his own there. But he is much more dangerous, of course, with his saber in hand. Some notable kills, victories, and feats of his: he has defeated Ventress, he's defeated Savage Press, Grievous on multiple occasions each. He has fought Maul to at least a standstill. He has fought Count Dooku to a standstill on several occasions, and in every opportunity with Dooku, Dooku fled the scene of the crime before Obi-Wan had an opportunity to keep it going long enough to claim a victory. But he also held his own against Pre Vizsla in hand-to-hand fighting, so that it showed his expertise there. And arguably, he won a 2-on-1 against Maul and Savage Press, dual wielding with Jar Kai. So he's a very accomplished swordsman, one of the most accomplished swordsmen fighting actual opponents during the Clone Wars era, rivaled really only, I'd say, by Anakin Skywalker and Ahsoka Tano, but mostly just because Ahsoka is in the same room as Obi-Wan and Anakin more often than not. But Obi-Wan,
pardon me,
he's in the top 3 of Clone Wars era combatants who just in sheer number of times had crossed blades with actual opponents. And
yeah, well, and I think it's something that is a high praise for Obi-Wan, which is another reason why I think this is such a fun matchup. Obi-Wan has, if it survived, if not has beaten every notable Jedi killer of his era.
And if
and
include Pre Vizsla, every saber wielding opponent, really, like
yeah, I mean,
not just Sith and Sith assassins, and Grievous would fall into that category, but also like Maul and Savage, obviously, but even Pre Vizsla with the Darksaber. I mean, that's not too much of a contest, but still, it's like
yeah,
every baddie to pick up a saber in the Clone Wars era, except Sidious, Obi-Wan has either defeated or fought to a standstill.
Yeah, and again, I think it is also worth noting that Count Dooku, who is arguably, and this is another episode Spencer and I want to do, like who is the true GOAT of the Clone War era. But Count Dooku, Darth Tyrannus, somebody who I think is arguably one of, if not the best. We'll put that asterisk there. I would say probably the best, pound for pound, of that era. Every time post Geonosis that Dooku throws down with Obi-Wan, Dooku opts to retreat by the end, and also relies on his Force abilities to do so.
Yeah.
Dooku is always falling back on his Force abilities to deal with Obi-Wan. And I think that's it. I think that's a very important thing to call attention to. That Dooku, who does not have the same weird, I'd rather kill you with my lightsaber than with the Force obsession that Darth Maul has circa the Phantom Menace, where he views using his Force abilities almost as like a cheat code or an emergency situation. But he actively chooses to fall back on his greater power in the Force to deal with Obi-Wan because he knows he cannot outfence him head to head, at least. So yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry for hijacking that. I just think it's really interesting that even though Dooku is the only person Obi-Wan does not have like a definitive W against, it all comes with the asterisk of Dooku ran away.
Yeah, I mean, it's, again, this is another episode for another time that you and I have so desired to just riff on air. But like, to what point do you have to suspend crowning Dooku the GOAT of the Clone Wars era because he's never fought someone to a conclusion other than his first encounter with Obi-Wan and Anakin, when they were both of them far too inexperienced to take on someone of his caliber. But like every opportunity they got after that, until Dooku's killed, he fights him on moving. It's like he's fighting him on one of those flat escalators in the airport. It's just like constant motion until he hops in his starship and skedaddles out of there. Like it's it'd be like, for a poor analogy, it'd be like crowning Babe Ruth the GOAT if he only played 3 innings of every ball game. Like nobody would consider him because he's only there. He puts in a couple humdingers in the first 3 innings, and then he's like, "No, I'm out. We'll see you."
Well, that's interesting, and I don't want to get too bogged down in the Dooku conversation here today, because while I do understand what you're saying, I do disagree with your premise a little bit. But this is all talk we can have whenever we inevitably get to Count Dooku versus Porter Angle. Stay tuned.
Yes, stay tuned.
Which I cannot wait to have that conversation. We might actually have a guest on that episode. A frequent collaborator of ours is very excited for that episode, and I would love to have him be a part of it.
Who is it?
Alden.
Oh, of course. Okay. All right.
No promises on that one, but it's a maybe.
Moving on. So hit us with Lord Starkiller's martial arts ability.
Lord Starkiller, he is familiar with all 7 forms of martial arts. And again, this is another interesting thing because he was trained by Proxy, who basically trained by Vader and Proxy, mostly Proxy for the blade to blade stuff, because Proxy is this walking data bank of basically every person who ever picked up a lightsaber, at least within Legends. So he trained in Juya. And as we've talked about before, every person who uses Juya uses it differently because Juya is kind of like the amalgamation of, or kind of like the, how do I put it? It's a Jedi martial artist going to their zenith. I've seen other people say this before, and I think it is true that Juya is almost more a philosophy than it is either version of Form 7, Juya or Vapad. Juya is kind of more a philosophy than it is a martial art. Because it is the emphasis on ferocity while blending everything you've learned. In Galen's case, it is a hybrid of Shien. Pardon me. It is a hybrid of Form 5 Shien and a Kenobi style use of Form 3. Despite being a Sith assassin, later Lord of the Sith, he is somebody who is very capable of a defensive fighting style. I know when you think Sith Lord, we all like to think of somebody coming down on you like an avalanche like Darth Vader, or like a, berserker like Kylo Ren, or this flurry of rage like Darth Maul. But Starkiller has a surprising like defensive acumen, and it's because he's aware of the fact that he is not invincible, despite what a lot of the fandom thinks of him. But yeah, he's trained in basically all forms of martial arts. In terms of notable kills, feats, and victories, he has quite the body count. He has bested Rom Koda, Maris Brood, killed Shakti and Kazdan Paratus. Depending on the ending of the game, he does fight Darth Sidious to a standstill and either beats Darth Vader into submission, or, as we're talking about here, fights Darth Vader to the death. He is incredibly talented in integrating force-based attacks into his lightsaber sequences, which is kind of the bread and butter of his fighting style, is finding inventive, clever, and almost sneaky ways to implement his overwhelming powers in the Force. It's the reason why he's able to defeat Vader. And Shakti to a certain extent. But Darth Vader, in my opinion, is a better swordsman than Galen, and he's stronger than Galen, and he's tougher than Galen. Galen's able to win because he, has been trained by Vader, so he kind of sees the holes in Vader's technique in a way that I don't think anybody else truly could, except the Emperor. But Galen is aware of the fact that one of his core powers is Vader's kryptonite. and knows that Vader's too smart to let Galen just electrocute him to death. So he is smart enough to then realize, okay, I have to move around Vader. I have to implement my ability to cast lightning on Vader at every moment that I can. And it cannot just be an endless torrent of lightning necessarily. But yeah, very smart guy, knows how to integrate his powers to devastating effect, and has skill with all forms of lightsaber combat. This is kind of a part of weapons and equipment, so I'm not going to get super into it. I will say, yes, the Sith Stalker does show Lord Starkiller carrying approximately 6 lightsabers. At no point other than when he executes Vader do we see him dual wielding. However, in The Force Unleashed 2, we see that this is something that Galen is talented at, or at least his clone, depending on who you ask. I love The Force Unleashed. It is such a mess, but it's a lovely mess. It's my mess.
It is. It's like a retcon convention.
Yes, bless this mess. That's another reason why I want to do a Force Unleashed retrospective, is I really want to get into the weeds about like why I think it's the real Starkiller in that game. But again, conversation for a different day. But like I said earlier, Lord Starkiller is packing. But because we never see him explicitly use 2 lightsabers in the Dark Side in the Ultimate Sith Edition DLC, and we only see him use them in The Force Unleashed 2, I'm going to say that he's not going to dual wield during this fight. But
I think that's fair. I mean, even I've always interpreted the belt full of sabers as like a wearable trophy case more than a utility. Like, it's imagine you are a Jedi on the run, and up walks this thing that looks like it cannot be there.
Emphasis on up walks this thing.
This thing that looks like it cannot be there for any reason other than to kill you, and you see 6 lightsabers of Jedi fashioning hanging around his belt. You're like, yep, this is like the new Grievous, except worse. He doesn't target kids, he targets everybody.
Well, here's what makes it even scarier. Like, if you look at what all is on his belt, he has his old lightsaber. He has, what was that baseline? That was funky. He has his old lightsaber. He has Kodas. He has Shock T's. He has Vader's, and he has Maul's. And he has his own. And those are just all off the top of my head. There might be more.
Yeah, I'm seeing all of those that like I see his own, I see Coda, I see Vader. And that's like on the one side wrapping around a bit. I'd say that's a pretty conclusive list.
So, yeah, you're dealing with somebody who, again, is there to be terrifying. Granted, not all of those lightsabers are ones that he, got the kill for. He didn't technically be the person to kill Coda the way Grievous wouldn't take a lightsaber. He didn't directly kill somebody for, but he did beat him. So, potato. And also, like, I might trim this out. You might want to turn off your computer audio if you can. Because
I have something playing?
That's the second time a random blast of music just came through.
A random blast of music?
Yes.
What did it sound like?
Earlier it was a very funky bass line, and just now there was like a wow.
A funky bass line. What do I have on? Is it gone?
Now it is, yeah. It was just like a random burst and then it ran away. But I was just giving you a heads up. But yeah. So this is where things get interesting. Now, I think Lord Starkiller is hands down one of the most uh, deadly combatant Star Wars has ever created. Um, obviously, with also with kills, feats, and victories, he does beat Empire Strikes Back era Luke Skywalker and does kill Old Ben Kenobi. I do think Starkiller is a absolute machine, especially in this form as a duelist. He isn't holding back anymore. He's fully entrenched in the dark side of the Force, and that evil, that rot inside his DNA, makes him like one of the ultimate weapons of the dark side. That said, in terms of blade to blade combat, I don't think this is anything Obi-Wan Kenobi can't handle.
No, I think you're absolutely right. It's gonna be an interesting fight. I'd pay ticket to watch, but it's nothing so extraordinary or out of the ordinary that I think Obi-Wan would be able to handle any of that with, if not ease, confidence.
I think that's a great way of putting it. If not with ease, then with confidence. And I agree completely. I think this is a fight that Obi-Wan is kind of bred for. It's one of the things I love about Obi-Wan is that he kind of, by the end of the Clone Wars, or by the end of his career as a whole as a Jedi, he's kind of made his name by fighting boogeymen in a way. Like he fights and defeats Maul. He's Grievous. Granted, it's kind of one-sided, but like he has this like rivalry with Grievous. He is the man who for the most part defeated Darth Vader at least twice. Like Obi-Wan Kenobi is kind of this like monster hunter when it comes to Sith,
but in a way that it's kind of like. It's like the opposite of a monster hunter. He's the guy that like all the monsters just gravitate to, and then he puts them down.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what I mean. Like there's almost like a Witcher type vibe to him. That again, he doesn't choose to be the dark side's favorite, guy to test your might against, but when duty calls, he's there to fight him. But yeah, no, like I said, I don't think martially Lord Starkiller is bringing anything to the table that Obi-Wan can't handle. Not by a long shot. So yeah, I think we can award a safe but definitive, or let me rephrase that. I think we can offer a definitive edge to Obi-Wan Kenobi, but not one that like removes Starkiller from the fight.
Oh no.
But if this was a sheer sword fight, Starkiller is grossly out of his element and may be in grave danger if he is not allowed to call on his Force abilities for whatever reason.
I concur.
Speaking of Force abilities, you want to take Obi?
Sure.
Cool.
All right. So Obi-Wan Kenobi is he is he is above averagely average. I mean, he's not in terms of his sheer power anywhere toward the top. His sheer how am I trying to say it? His raw force ability is middle of the road or so, maybe slightly above average, but what he has accomplished through training and honing that craft puts him in the lower top tier, I'd say, of Force users. It's not that he's got an unbelievable amount of power or an unusual number of tricks up his sleeve. He just has spent a lot of time studying and training and becoming very, very good at a handful of things, namely telekinesis, and force assisted acrobatics. Those are his two go-tos. And it's like Obi-Wan's threshold for ability is going to be lower than that of an Anakin or that of a Sidious, obviously, but Obi-Wan has achieved near, if not 100% completion of his threshold. Like he's limited in his raw ability compared to some others, but he has milked his raw ability for every ounce that it's worth through training and practice. And we have seen him do a number of incredible feats with telekinesis, lifting several objects at once, force pushing people like Grievous and Ventress and a bunch of other people, force pulling them as well. In one of my favorite Obi-Wan force wielding moments during the Zygerian slave trader arc in Clone Wars, he lifts up and then crushes into a ball two commando droids simultaneously with a wave of his hand. It's like it's not even, it doesn't even require concentration for him. He's just like, boom, done. And that's an excellent example. I think that's maybe the best example of what we're looking at with Obi-Wan. He's not incredibly powerful, but he has honed his ability to maximum efficiency and maximum power for his own force threshold. So yeah, he's nothing to sneeze at, but he doesn't have nearly as many tricks up his sleeve, or I would not even say as much raw power as Starkiller has. And so, Jared, would you please go ahead?
Yeah, no, just to keep talking about Obi-Wan's force abilities, because they often, Obi-Wan doesn't typically get his flowers as a force user because what he normally does is so nuanced. It's not like crazy force pushes that can like level a building. It's stuff like what you just described, like very precise crushing two commando droids. Or, again, this isn't like the era or the circumstance with which he did it, but what we see him do in Kenobi, where I think Kenobi shows Obi-Wan's upper limits in a way that I think is really subtle and interesting that we see. And it's something we've discussed before, something we theorized on, that Kenobi kind of gave us a definitive answer. That Obi-Wan, how do I put this? Because our like muscle atrophy theory of like, you're not using the force, you're not giving yourself over to it, therefore that muscle kind of starts to deteriorate. We see Obi-Wan go from struggling to catch Leia, which is something we've seen him do, 10 times that feat without breaking a sweat, to within a couple days of like truly letting himself become one with the force again, and with the power of love amp he gets, realizing that if he fails here, like Luke and Leia are in grave danger beyond their understanding. We see him throw that gigantic cluster of rocks off of him. We see him just ragdoll Darth Vader with a force push, which is something we've only ever seen in a trailer for The Force Unleashed 2.
Yeah.
Like, that doesn't even happen in the game. I've only ever seen that in a trailer for that game. Other than that, I've never seen anybody just shit whip Darth Vader. And again, he does like the Avatar, the Last Airbender, earth bending, he's throwing all the rocks at him, and we see him do like this crazy, just like straight horizontal Wolverine style lunge, just with a force jump, like a torpedo. Like, we see levels of force-based physical augmentation and telekinesis that we've never seen from him before. And while I don't necessarily think Obi-Wan can call on that in an instant, it shows that like I think it's crazy that if he wanted to be at that level, theoretically he could be. And when he's pushed far enough, he can be. You know, this is the same guy who, again, not because he's a powerhouse, but because he is a dedicated trainee and practitioner of the Force, is able to meet Darth Vader head on telekinetically during the Battle of the Heroes. Like, that's insane. That is an insane Force feat. And I think it's one of his more impressive ones that, like, as time goes on, only becomes more and more a drop in the bucket. So yeah, all of that to say, Obi-Wan never gets his flowers. And when push comes to shove, he is a force to be reckoned with, pun intended. That said, Galen Merrick is a telekinetic powerhouse. He has mastered the rare Force Repulse ability. He uses Force Lightning in very clever and interesting ways. He does typically have issues breaking opponents' Force barriers. However, by the time we see him as Lord Starkiller, I would question that a little bit. Because we do see him just ragdolling other Force users with telekinesis. However, I will say he does that to Obi-Wan, Old Ben Kenobi, after he had mortally wounded him, and he also does it to basically Padawan Luke Skywalker. So while I don't think Lord Starkiller is necessarily going to do that to, say, a Anakin Skywalker, in pitched battle necessarily, I think he could very easily catch a well-trained Force user off guard and definitely pick him up and toss him around. However, as we will get to with Obi-Wan, there is another blast of music. People leave a comment and tell y'all if y'all are hearing that too, or if I'm going crazy. It might be on my end for some reason, perhaps, but I don't think it is. I don't think there's anything playing on my side.
It sounds like the kind of thing that would be like an ad that's running on some other page that I have up. I'm just gonna X out of everything
and come back to it. But yeah. However, when it comes to Obi-Wan and juxtaposing them side by side, that does become an issue because Obi-Wan does famously have issues blocking other Force attacks. It might be the only way that he is defensively deficient to any of his contemporaries. Now, again, normally when this is happening, he is dealing with some of the more powerful beings in the galaxy who are opposed to him, like a Dooku or a Maul, but also people like Ventress, who, while they are powerful, are not known for their Force acumen when it comes to this tier of fighter. And she's, again, normally able to knock Obi-Wan around with the Force a good bit. So I think without much debate, we can give a definitive edge to Lord Starkiller in terms of Force abilities. He is, on the whole, far more willing to use his powers defensively or offensively, rather, and implement them into his lightsaber sequences in a more consistent and devastating way than Obi-Wan. Not that Obi-Wan, again, is afraid to do so or neglects to do so. He just does it a lot more and a lot more effectively than Obi-Wan does, in my opinion. Your thoughts?
No, I completely agree. I think while Kenobi, you cannot fault him for working with what he's got. I mean, the Jedi Order puts a fence around the abilities that Starkiller excels at, and yet for what the Jedi have deemed acceptable use of the Force, Obi-Wan is as good at it as anyone could ever hope to be with the raw talent and the raw power that they have. And yet, although you can't say anything bad about Obi-Wan for that, like, you're still dealing with Starkiller, who has a much deeper arsenal of Force ability and frankly a more dangerous one, and one that he practices a lot. Like, he's I wouldn't say that he has achieved the level of mastery, relatively speaking, as Obi-Wan has. But even with what he's got, Starkiller is comfortably the more dangerous opponent of the two in terms of his force ability. So I am happy to give Starkiller the edge.
Excellent. All right. Moving on to weapons and equipment. I'll go first since you were punching in the edge on that one still. In terms of weapons and equipment for this version, Lord Starkiller has his Sith Stalker armor. So he's got, cybernetic arm, his very weird and scary arm blade, a litany of lightsabers, none of which he seems to use all at once. And, some light armor across his suit, namely the gigantic shoulder pauldron and a helmet, which is, I think, half cosmetic and half respiratory. We see it come off during that one vision quest that Galen has in the novelization and in the Jedi Temple DLC. However, since it is a vision of the future, I think it is allowed for it to come off. But I do think... How do I put this? I think if the helmet comes off, the danger level is more akin to Malgus than it is to Vader. Like, both of them will suffocate.
Yeah.
But Vader's apparatus kind of shutting off is like his entire body function.
Yeah.
Altogether. Whereas just, again, that whole, the dark side will sustain me long enough. If that helmet comes off or is significantly damaged, I do think Galen, like it is the case with Malgus, has a shot clock of sorts before, we get into an issue of breathing.
Yeah.
And again, I say that because, he has a mechanical in the game. So I'm making an assumption there. Maybe that's not the case, but I do feel like that is the nature of his equipment. Yeah. Oh, he also has his claws. I forgot about those.
Yeah, he's got his his knife fingers going on. I mean, he just looks like a living weapon is what he looks like. I remember as a kid, I didn't have the Force Unleashed game, and the only place I ever played it was actually at Joel's house on the Wii. I cranked through the campaign at Joel's house in like the 4th grade or the 5th grade on his Wii in like one sleepover, and that was it. That's the only time I'd ever played it until much later whenever I got the game. But I remember seeing the Lord Starkiller Sith Stalker armor for the first time. I was like, that's just excessive. Like, that guy's just like a living weapon. So he's a dangerous dude. Starkiller has got offensive and defensive equipment on his person, whether or not he uses it or whether it's just to make him look really scary. Either way, it's there. So
yeah, I would even compare it to not compare it necessarily, but like if this were something like Superpowered Beatdown or Death Battle, where there was like a presentation of the fight. Because like Death Battle, I don't know how much you've ever watched Death Battle.
Nope.
It's okay. They've done some wild matchups that end in ways that just boggle the mind that I will never fully understand some of. But they do like a fun, like animated version of the fight. And normally the way that Death Battle treats their combatants is everybody is like, they go into it knowing the only way to win is to kill, which part of that, like, and it goes into how we do things, like I don't like that. Like they have used Batman a number of times. And I don't think you can adequately put Batman in a combat situation with the caveat that he's willing to kill, because that fundamentally changes how he fights then.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like Batman at his base level is not throwing like lethal blows. He has equipment on him that could kill somebody, but he only ever uses what a normal person would consider lethal force on a being he knows he can't kill.
Yeah.
But Death Battle likes to basically go like with a comic book character. If they've ever had, like, for some reason had like a god level power, inexplicably, even if they're not in that form, they will use that power. So because Obi-Wan is skilled in Jarkai or like the Ataru version of dual blade fencing, whichever one that he favors, both are equally likely. I could totally see this fight at one point becoming like Obi-Wan using the Force to like pull Rom Koda's lightsaber off of his belt, and then they're both dual wielding.
I was thinking the same thing. Like, if anybody cracks open that can, it's going to be Obi-Wan. Like, he's going to see, because we see it from him often enough. Like, even in the Clone Wars aboard the One Republic cruiser, when he's just trying to keep Grievous occupied, like, he incapacitates a Magna Guard and picks up the Electro Staff and is dual wielding with a saber in one hand and an Electro Staff in the other. Like,
yeah,
if Obi-Wan has an opportunity to get the edge by dual wielding, he almost always takes it. And so we can talk about that. This is going to be very exciting. We can talk about that a bit later on, either in tactics and mindset or in the fight breakdown. But like, it's one of those situations where whether or not the original artists intended it for it to be utilized or purely cosmetic, it doesn't matter, because it like you're saying, it fundamentally has the potential to change how the fight goes.
Yeah. And again, that's why I say, like, do I think one of them pulling a second lightsaber on the other one is going to fundamentally change the outcome? Not really. If Galen is the only person dual wielding, Obi-Wan has fought mostly dual wielders. Like, by the numbers, the people he fights the most either use more than one lightsaber or at least more than one lightsaber blade at a time, between Maul, Ventress, and Grievous.
And Savage too.
And Savage, yeah. Weirdly enough, like, a standard build lightsaber is the minority of people he fights.
Yeah.
Between Dooku, Vader, and Pre Vizsla, technically. But yeah, all that to say, you got to do weapons and equipment for Obi.
Yeah, he's got a blue lightsaber. He's got Jedi robes, and he's got a utility belt, which is.
Well, we're using the clone armor here too, so he's got a little bit of armor as well.
That's true. So he's got what are essentially greaves. He's got his gauntlets as well, and we're giving him his little chest plate, dew flinger.
Hot take real quick.
Yeah.
So Taylor and I have, I mean, obviously I've seen it, but Taylor and I have started watching Clone Wars. I cannot wait for you to see her next to pick her brain about it. She has just as many fascinating opinions as you think she does.
I'm usually scared by fascinating opinions. Not that there's anything wrong with Taylor as a person, but she tends to think in a way that scares me a little bit.
Yes.
Sometimes, for instance, her favorite song off that one album that we both enjoy.
No! Feel free to expose her for that. I've tweeted about it.
Yeah. Her favorite track off Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers is "We Cry Together." Like,
it was in her Spotify. That wasn't in her like top 5 Spotify Wrapped, but it was as an individual song in the playlist.
It's like, listen, it's not even that it's a hot take. It's just like, are you well? Are you fundamentally well? And
yeah,
so I'm interested to hear, because it's a kid's show, wink, wink. No, it's not. But it's a kid
It's
show. So like,
the
how twisted can you get with it? Really?
the thing that has been most entertaining, and I'll say this is like a quick little sidebar, and then we'll get back into what my actual hot take is that most of her bandwidth for this show has been taken up by the ethical questions of the clone army existing.
Oh my goodness.
So she's like been oscillating between their child soldiers and trying to process the horrible ways we see clone troopers die. Because technically one of the first episodes you're supposed to watch is Hidden Enemy.
Oh yeah.
And we're watching that episode, and she's already like, oh my God, like all these clones just keep dying. Oh my God. And it hits me as we're approaching it that we're about to get to the scene where the clone went back to the battlefield to harvest battle droid fingers.
Which is like,
and put them on a necklace. And like, as they're like
totally slipped by us as kids. Like that totally didn't register to me as a kid.
Like as how deeply fucked up that is.
Yeah.
And as we're slowly approaching it, I'm sitting on the couch and I just start giggling to myself. And she's like, what are you laughing at? And I said, just get ready. Just get ready. And then that was immediately followed up by us watching the Clone Wars movie. And whenever they make that big push during the Battle of Christophsis, there's a clone who gets shot in the head so hard that his helmet flies off, and she squealed when this guy got popped. But what I was going to say was Obi-Wan and Anakin's Clone Wars Season 1 costumes for the first half of the show outfits is what they should have worn for the entire war, including Revenge of the Sith with capes. That is my hot take. Anakin especially, because it's such a good foreshadowing for Vader.
Ahsoka included? Did you say Ahsoka?
No, Anakin and Obi-Wan, like they're full suits of armor.
Okay, all right.
No, we are anti Ahsoka tube top on this podcast.
Thank you. I am firmly in that camp as well of being anti tube top.
It is a little uncomfortable to watch the 14-year-old go to war kind of half naked.
Yeah.
George and Dave Filoni be wildin'. But yeah, Starkiller gets weapons and equipment edge, I would say.
Can confirm. Comfortably so. Yeah, so we'll move right along to tactics and mindset, starting with our good general, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Obi-Wan is the type that will try to avoid a pitched match if at all possible. But once he's in it, he is in it to be victorious, not necessarily to kill or to injure or anything like, but to end the fight in his favor. He's a very careful planner. He's a strategist, and not in like a pithy way, but he's truly an academic. Like it's mind-boggling to me, like just how awesome Obi-Wan Kenobi is sometimes, because he is so deadly, and yet sometimes he reminds me of that line from Age of Ultron, you know, when Nat is talking to the Hulk and she's like, here's this guy that spends his whole life trying to avoid a fight because he knows he'll win. And with Obi-Wan, that's like partially true, because he does get beaten sometimes, but also he's always looking for another way out, and he's always looking to study the situation, to learn from it, and to apply lessons and things that he's learned along the way to current situations. I think that's just really cool. Like, again, tangentially, in the Brain Invader story arc of Clone Wars, where he's just like, he's so fixated on studying the mind control worms, like he's not even thinking about the army of zombies around him, or the fact that like Luminara is detained up there. He's just like, what do you think? You think it'll go through the nose or through the ear? or through the mouth? What do you think? And Anakin's like, I don't care. We need to deal with it. And he's like, I think it'll go through the nose. And then whenever he gets a hold of it, he's like, Anakin, I wanted to study that. Like, that's just, it's so funny how nerdy and yet how suave Obi-Wan is sometimes, but that's how he approaches everything from situations like that to combative situations. Like, he is highly strategic and he is highly academic when it comes to plotting his approach to a fight and as he goes about it. And in so doing, he's highly defensive. He draws out the fight, moving it to different settings and using transitions into new locations to recover a little bit as needed. But his primary strategy is to outlast his opponent, to let them kind of run ragged themselves. So then, whenever an opening presents itself from their fatigue, he is able to exploit it quickly and turn the tide in his favor right off the bat.
Yeah. I mean, and it's something that's very important with just, him being a Sarisu specialist. He is this, brick wall defensively that you basically will just break yourself by just ramming yourself into repeatedly. And his whole game is to gas people out. Also, you almost completely quoted one of my favorite passages from the Revenge of the Sith novel.
Really? What did I say?
A phenomenal pilot who doesn't like to fly, a devastating warrior who'd rather not fight, a negotiator without peer who frankly prefers to sit alone in a quiet cave and meditate. Matthew Stover's Revenge of the Sith novelization. But that quote, everything you just said, it perfectly encapsulates Obi-Wan. He is a deeply cerebral, analytical warrior who would rather not fight, but when he has to, gets down and dirty, like what you were what you were talking about earlier, with him, like picking up the Magna Guard staff and like dual wielding and stuff. Like Obi-Wan, truly, as you were saying,
Dog.
but he does have that dog in him. He scraps, like he's one of those Star Wars combatants who is a scrapper. I don't want to say he fights dirty, because that kind of implies like a dishonorability about it. But like, he also is not somebody who's like going to let himself lose because the other person is standing on ceremony. Like I think the best way to describe it, and again, this is Twin Sons, and this is we're using Obi-Wan pre him like fully killing Maul, but we're dealing with somebody who is willing to stand on the ceremony of doing like an opening salute stance in a duel, who also is 100% okay with just three-piecing Maul.
Yeah.
Like he will stand on like that ceremony of decorum, which granted, like, it's, like the opening stance is like an important thing with martial arts because it's kind of like a ready stance. But he also does not care so much about like the thrill of battle to let it go on a second longer than it has to.
Yeah.
Which, again, another reason why this is interesting is because Siri, for some reason, thought I was talking to them and was just writing everything I've been saying out for like a minute. It's interesting because Starkiller is kind of like a dark reflection of Obi-Wan. And I think it's interesting that Vader trained Starkiller to have some of Obi-Wan's tendencies. Because looking at the descriptions of Starkiller's like, tactics and stuff, fight smarter, not harder is like the number one thing I have written and in all caps. And it's true. Starkiller rarely rushes in to face somebody head on. Which again, like we all talk about Starkiller being this, oh my God, like in crazy, like giga powerful force god. He's not. He is somebody who, yes, he fights somebody head to head, but he is also trying to find like crafty ways to, pierce their defenses. He looks for unorthodox ways to unseat his opponents. He works to redirect more than he does to evade or absorb. Again, this is where that Form 5 specialization comes into play, that he has like the tight defense of Form 3 to kind of batten down the hatches. But more of his sword play is a very aggressive counteroffensive. And it's interesting because I think he's one of those few fighters who uses Shien in lightsaber combat and not like the Gemso variant, because it is so heavily based around like parrying, deflection. Now, in his Lord Starkiller form, again, it is only against Old Ben and Padawan Luke Skywalker, but he is still like really bearing down on his enemies. And I think there was a little bit more Gemso in there. I think there was a little bit more brute force involved. But still, there's a lot of that redirection. And he very evenly relies on his force abilities and his lightsaber skills very evenly. And he will do anything to take advantage of the environment. And again, he does not stand on the ceremony of, swordsman's, noble fencing match. This is the same guy who, again, when he fought Old Ben Kenobi, the moment he got a chance, even though he stabbed Obi-Wan in the chest, he did not finish him with his sword. He picked his ass up and threw him into the thrusters of the Millennium Falcon to disintegrate him.
Yeah.
This is not, neither of these guys are people who stand on ceremony necessarily. That said, tactics and mindset, I am leaning Obi-Wan Kenobi.
I'm not sure how I feel. I'm certainly more familiar with Obi-Wan, even having played 1.5 Force Unleashed games, and brushing up on some of the material for this versus matchup. I want to say that while in many ways you're right, like Starkiller is kind of a dark reflection of Obi-Wan, but I think in some ways Starkiller's tendency to press the advantage is going to play a little bit into Obi-Wan's hands, because even though Starkiller tends to look for unorthodox ways to throw the enemy off, and sometimes Obi-Wan is susceptible to that kind of thing, it does still feed into Obi-Wan's delay tactic, his wearing out tactic, like convincing the opponent to press the advantage or what they think is the advantage. So I could honestly see it going either way, sheerly based on tactics. Like if they were playing chess, I think it would work out roughly the same, I think. But because I think Starkiller's offensive would play a little bit into Obi-Wan's hands, I'm inclined to give him a slight edge, but I don't think it's much.
So here's my rationale. Starkiller, in my opinion, has not fought somebody as cerebral. And again, like when he fought Old Ben Kenobi, he was dealing with somebody who, like in A New Hope, especially now that we have like the context of, however many movies, TV show, games, and books and what have you. Obi-Wan, I think the moment he sees that message from Leia, knows this is his last ride. I don't think like if he can get out of this adventure alive, I think he wants to. But I think he also knows I'm going to come in direct conflict with Vader, and I think it's going to be me or the kids.
Yeah.
Then that's just my interpretation of it. So Obi-Wan, I think, when he confronts Lord Starkiller in Docking Bay 94, has that same mental process of my job here is to make sure that the twins are safe. And I cannot let this Sith Lord take Luke or the droids with the Death Star plans.
Yeah.
So he's going to be dealing with a version of Obi-Wan that is not going to be so resigned to that that good night, as it were. And conversely, I don't think this is much different for Obi-Wan than like facing Maul during the Clone Wars. I think there is a similarity in like vicious brutality that Obi-Wan is prepared for. Now that like if I were to use like a comic book comparison, I would say Lord Starkiller and TCW, like early TCW Maul to a certain extent, are like Carnage, like the villain Carnage, where they're you're just dealing with a force of destruction, you know, where like that is not to take away from Lord Starkiller's tactical abilities, but in Maul's case at least, you're dealing with somebody who just wants to kill, who just wants to do harm. Like it takes basically a year and a half for Maul to even agree to the idea of like having a plan. At first, it's just kill Obi-Wan, kill. And Obi-Wan, while he does struggle initially with that level of viciousness and brutality, can eventually overcome it. And that's what I think he's going to be dealing with here, is that he's dealing with just a sheer storm of like malignant violence that I think on the whole he can definitely weather. It is going to be, again, as is the case with most of these versus matchups, because we like to kind of pit characters against what I think their limit might be, will be the fight of his life.
Yeah.
That I think can only be compared to the times he will fight Vader. So yeah, that's why I'm leaning tactics and mindset.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
well said, sir. Well said. I'm inclined to agree.
So before we get to picking an arena, I'm going to have the lovely Taylor Nacy pick our arena.
Oh.
I'm going to have her come into the office here for a second. Not necessarily on camera because she's in her PJs, but she could just holler over. My Dookie phone is not sending the message. Stand by. Recalling is ringing.
It's ringing.
Hey, can you poke your head in the office for a second? You got to pick a number between 1 and 12. I don't think it is. Okay, we'll try to open it, and if I accidentally locked it, I'll unlock it. Okay, she's coming. She is on the way.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the studio.
Oh, wait, I did accidentally lock the door. She was right. One moment.
I know you are, honey. Wonderful, the wickedly talented.
You don't have to get on camera.
Okay.
Hold on. Let me get situated again.
Actually, you know who alerted me?
Who?
Richard. You're calling me?
Yeah. Richard is our cat, for those of you at home. Okay, Taylor, I need you to pick a number between 1 and 12.
11.
Ooh, we got a good one, folks. We have the Coruscant Works hideout, aka Sidious's hangar in Attack of the Clones, where in Tales of the Jedi we see Count Dooku kill one Master Yaddle. Thank you, honey.
I was hoping that is what you meant by that, because as I was thinking about some of the recent Star Wars content that we've gotten, I was thinking, how awesome would it be to have that hangar in there? I can't figure. Thank you. I feel like an old man, but
It's okay. You're
I've got
playing music from whatever pop-up ad is in the background again.
Hey,
Can't
man,
highlight the document.
I can't do it. I mean, I don't know what it is. I don't have anything.
I'm waiting for you to start doing a Joe Biden voice at this point.
The only things up.
Listen, man.
The only things up right now are related to the show. I got 3 Google Docs up, and I got StreamYard, and that's it.
That is so funny. I wonder where that's coming from. That is so funny. Again, people who listen to this, let us know if you guys can hear that, because I think it's hilarious.
I think you might be losing your marbles, my friend.
You think I'm losing my marbles?
Because, like, if it were coming from me, then why wouldn't I be able to hear it? Are you sure you don't have a tab in there that's got an ad running someplace? Because
I don't. I checked. There was a muted ad on one of the websites I pulled up to get a picture of Starkiller. There's a Battlefront 2 mod I was looking at, but it was a muted ad and it's no longer running. So,
wow.
Anyway,
in any case,
I am going to pull up a picture of the Coruscant Works so we can show it off so people can visualize the hangar. Like I said, this is going to be where Count Dooku fought and killed Yaddle in Tales of the Jedi. Actually, let me get Yaddle fight. I'm going to get like a good like wide shot of the space. But yeah, so I think this is an interesting arena. It is going to be, so here, let me share screen. So for like an initial shot, now for the sake of space, I will say that the Solar Sailor isn't there. So you got a pretty wide space that also has Yaddle fight again. That also has this very wide open hangar door as well. So you do have a little bit of an environment hazard. Someone could get just thrown through the hangar door. However, as I say very often, there are some fighters who you do not want to be forced to have to face head on. And I think Lord Starkiller is one of them.
I would agree.
So I think this fight is going to be a gnarly one. I think this is going to be mostly a sword fight, and I think Obi-Wan Kenobi is better off keeping it that way as best as he can. Because eventually his guard, with at least in terms of the Force, will be broken. And he, at that point, is in a lot of danger, in my opinion. I also, because of his conditioning, I do not see Starkiller getting into a situation where he starts to slow down or run out of gas, which again is going to be a very scary situation for the Negotiator.
Yeah, seeing as that is more or less his principal tactic is to try and wear down. It's gonna be bad for Obi-Wan if he's unable to. And yeah, you're right. Like this is an insanely endurance trained guy in Starkiller.
Endurance trained, who's also now part droid.
Yeah,
like he's like normal Galen Merrick. This would be dicey. Lord Starkiller, you're dealing with a machine.
Yeah.
So this is a dangerous place to be for my money.
All right. So, okay. So the two of them meet up in the hangar. They know they have to fight. Nobody tells them about the other. Like they just go at it. I think it's obvious that Obi-Wan starts on the defensive right off the bat, and I think Starkiller is going to be holding back a little bit, but he's going to be probing to try and find his best avenue of approach. He's going to be scanning the room for things to throw or for different angles to take this fight and do something unexpected. And I think it's going to reach a point. I think you're absolutely right. For Obi-Wan to have a chance to win this fight, he's going to have to realize that he needs to keep it a saber fight at all costs. But I think one of the key questions is going to be, how is Obi-Wan going to do that? Like, how would he pull off keeping it strictly a saber fight without letting Starkiller pop off with the Force? I don't like, other than the fact that there's a gaping hole in the wall where the entrance to the hangar is, there's not a whole lot to work with. It's essentially like an open room. It's just an empty gymnasium for all intents and purposes.
Yeah.
So he's not going to be able to move this fight the way he might have been able to. We said, like he will strategically draw out and move as a recovery, but also as a way to change the setup and change the terms of engagement if he needs to. But he really doesn't have an opportunity to do that. And if he's got nothing to work with, and it's essentially a sandbox for Starkiller to play in, he's Obi-Wan, other than countering with Force abilities of his own, or even more dangerously pressing the attack, I don't think like Starkiller is going to get creative. He's going to hit as often with the Force as he does with his saber.
Yeah.
And unless Obi-Wan presses the offensive, which is unusual for him and potentially dangerous, then it's like he's just going to be a sitting duck.
Let me look outside the immediate area, because I don't think like right outside the hangar is where like that weird network of catwalks is, where like Yoda fights Sidious in that vision.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's just a straight drop out of the hangar. So like, and I had in mind that this was just in the hangar.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's just a straight drop down. Like that is just a patented Star Wars forever fall.
Yeah, this is an arena does make a difference. It doesn't make all the difference in most cases, but this is in a situation where
it very much colors the fight. It removes people's ability to do certain things. Like again, like something like the number 4 arena, or even number 9, these more open spaces where Obi-Wan can move, you know, like that's really good for him, because the simple reality is the likelihood of him getting hit and stunned with a Force ability that puts him in a situation where he basically just hits a wall, like literally is knocked into a wall with nowhere really to go, for Starkiller to just come down on him. That's where you get into real danger. Now, again, Obi-Wan being the crafty little son of a gun he is, I could see him, again, like if you're running this, like we always make the joke, like if we do this Deadliest Warrior style, run the simulation 1,000 times. If you run the simulation 1,000 times, I think maybe 100 or so times, Starkiller lands a devastating force push or a just agonizing torrent of lightning or hits him with a repulse that sends Obi-Wan into a wall. Starkiller moves in for the kill, and Obi-Wan snags one of those lightsabers and completely changes like the avenue of the fight and maybe kills him right there. Like he drops him in that moment of like, I have a split second to act.
Yeah.
But I think you're dealing with somebody who packs so much of a punch and is able to seamlessly integrate it into his blade sequences that I think he's going to be able to pop a good shot on Obi-Wan and it be one that he doesn't recover from that quickly. You know, like I think he could wear him down and, you know, pierce right through that force barrier. And, you know, God forbid, like he goes through the port.
Yeah.
In the hangar. Or again, if he's able to stun Obi-Wan, there's not a whole lot of room for him to get around that. You know, in an environment where Obi-Wan could move a little bit more. Because that's the thing with Galen Merrick, is he's good at finding like environmental advantages. But he's not the type of person to be like, I'm going to run away. Now you have to follow me. You know, he doesn't like Obi-Wan. Darth Maul do that a lot and really well. Vader does it eventually. Like when he's locked in the suit, Vader does that very well. It's not something Galen does very often. Galen, even though he's good at like in the moment, being the kind of person to be like, fuck you. I broke a window and now you're flying out into space.
Yeah.
He's not the kind of person to be like, oh, I have better balance than you do. Fight me in the rafters.
Yeah.
That's something Maul would do. That's something Obi-Wan would do. That's something that I think would work in a lot of these other arenas. This is not one of them.
I agree. It's bad footing for Obi-Wan. It's not ideal for Starkiller either, but it is better suited for Starkiller's ratio of swordsmanship to force use in active combat. And Obi-Wan is equipped to handle it, but it is the long-term strategy that Obi-Wan employs is going to see really quickly the returns diminish.
Yeah.
It's not going to, Starkiller isn't going to tire quickly enough. They're going to tire almost at a similar rate. I would say that Obi-Wan's stamina still is greater than Starkiller's, but pound for pound, they're going to stay similar enough to the point where like they're both running on empty at about the same time in terms of their stamina. And Starkiller, even though Obi-Wan is like the defensive fighter of all defensive fighters, Starkiller just has a more explosive offense. That could easily catch Obi-Wan off guard at the right moment or with the right level of power put behind it.
Galen is a shotgun blast of a fighter, and he is quite literally in a room that is like perfect shotgun range.
Yeah.
You know, and
I completely agree. That's a great way of putting it. And I think at some point, like we say, you run the sim 1,000 times, at least half of those, Obi-Wan uses the Force to snag one of those spare lightsabers. I'm convinced of it because that's where his mind goes, especially I think probably in more like 75%. When Obi-Wan starts to see that his strategy isn't keeping Starkiller's explosive offense at bay, he's going to be looking for an option pretty quickly, like relatively soon into the Obi-Wan's going to clock those sabers. He's going to try it out. And then like, as soon as he's like, oh, dang, this guy's more formidable than I thought. He's going to snag one of those sabers and it's going to keep the status quo for a while, but it's not going to make enough of a difference in the end, I don't think.
Yeah. Unless he's able to do something like really quick and decisive.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying. Like I think it would be a scenario where like Starkiller mollywops him with the Force and is moving in for the kill, where Obi-Wan, like in the same movement, like again, like Force pulls one of the sabers off and then hits Galen with it immediately, like
Yeah.
in that brief opening, almost like he does to Grievous.
Yeah.
Like that,
Yeah.
oh shit, he's moving in for the kill, now's the chance. But like 9 times out of 10, I'm going to put my money on Starkiller getting off that finishing blow before Obi-Wan does that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So I suppose we may crown Lord Starkiller the winner of our first matchup for the 2023 season.
I'm surprised. I didn't know. Again, these are one of those fun ones. I didn't know who we were going to say was going to win.
I didn't either. I mean, I tend to gravitate toward Kenobi just because I know what he's capable of, and he can beat most people. So whenever I'm unsure, I gravitate toward Kenobi. But I honestly had no idea. Like I didn't have any idea who I thought was going to take this one. So it was a good one. It was some good conversation, some good evaluation that came out of it. Do we have any wrap up thoughts? Any caveats or anything?
No, not really that I can think of. We discussed briefly, just to give people a peek into what we were talking about off air. We discussed briefly whether or not we wanted to use Obi-Wan circa the Kenobi show. That is why I had to remake the thumbnail as we were speaking, because I defaulted to like the Hoth outfit for Lord Starkiller and used Obi-Wan circa the show. But the more I thought of, the more we discussed it and talked about it, the more we realized that it was a bit more of a lopsided fight than we preferred. But yeah, no, I'm really happy with how this one turned out. It's going to be interesting moving forward. I'm very excited. Like I said, you guys in the next week or so can expect Qui-Gon Jinn versus Siege of Mandalore, Ahsoka Tano, which again I think is going to be a really fun fight. Qui-Gon is another character who I think is like really hard to like find a good competitor for, because there's a lot of people who like severely outclass him, but the people who he is better than, he blows out of the water. He not unlike Maul, kind of has that same like, you know, they're really really good until they are like abruptly not viable type issue, and I think pitting him against somebody who is who is a certified goat in her own right, in her era, where I think she might be at her least practiced. I think will be really fun and interesting. But yeah, like I said, we have a lot of cool ones coming your way, guys. In no particular order, you know, coming down the pipeline. We have Shakti versus Darth Vader. We have Stella Geos versus Anakin Skywalker. Darth Krayt versus Darth Sidious. The one I am most excited for this season, Count Dooku versus Porter Angle. Mace versus Exar Kun. Kyle Katarn versus General Grievous. And then, yeah, like I said, in the next week or so, expect Siege of Commander Ahsoka Tano, to use the Galaxy of Heroes jargon, I guess. Commander Ahsoka Tano versus Phantom Menace Qui-Gon Jinn. So yeah, with that, a brief shout out to our patrons. Let me get the list up here real quick. A thank you to stop telling me all your cool new updates. A brief word of thanks to do our audio drops for our $10 patrons as we go, because I want to thank the people who get this show as well. Thank you to Keandre Lloyd. Armin from Comic Book Cast, Paco, or as he's going by in the Patreon, $1.5 billion.
Ladies and
baby.
gentlemen.
From the front lines of the information war, it's Alex Jones.
Love that clip. We also got Charlotte, who is a day one supporter of the Nerd Academy as well. Thank you to everybody who supports us. This episode will likely be one of the ones we drop to the public, just because it's a fun matchup, and you know, that algorithm, baby. People love the Force Unleashed. So for those of you who are catching this for the first time on the house, be sure to subscribe to the $5 tier of the Patreon, which is a tier where you get the Versus Series. We have an extensive backlog of episodes, about 30 of these off the top of my head. You know, if you aggregate, let me think. Yeah, just about. We have basically have 2 half seasons and a whole year's worth, plus any extras floating around in there. So I'll have to go through and actually count. But like I said, we have a huge back catalog of these episodes. If you'd like to go check them out, again, $5 a month gets you access to that. Movie Club is going to be on kind of a, I don't want to say permanent hiatus, but a hiatus nonetheless, because Devin is not going to really have the time for that. So I'm going to be working on finding some new stuff to make exclusively for the Patreon. When we can, we're going to be dropping episodes of the podcast that get recorded ahead of time early on Patreon, as much as I can at least. So stay tuned for that. Otherwise, thank you all so very much for watching and listening. We are honored that you have joined us, and we'll see you in the fighting pit next time.
Stop! Move away from the cookie jar!